Broadcasting from Orchard Park, New York,
and Boca Raton, Florida,
it's the Freight 360 podcast. From freight broker sales tips to sports talk, this podcast is all about helping you grow as a freight broker. We're your hosts, Nate Cross
and Benjamin Kowalski.
Let's talk freight. All right. Welcome back for episode 221 of the Freight 360 podcast. We're going to be doing a special discussion on produce today in just a little bit here. But first, if you have not done it yet, please hit that subscribe button. Hit the little bell notification on YouTube if you're on there. Make sure you're tracking us on whatever podcast app you're using so you get all of our new content every Friday and Tuesday. Make sure to leave that review or YouTube comment and share us with all of your other friends in the industry to help get the good word out there from Freight 360. And check out our website, freight360.net. It's a full online library, and we just launched a brand new website in the last week. So make sure to check it out. It's cool. It's very easy to use and search, and it's going to recommend follow-on videos and blogs and whatnot to check out. So definitely check out the website. And as always, check out our Freight Broker Basics course to learn more about how to start your own brokerage, or even just grow your customer base, get better at sales and operations, and hire the right employees if that's where you're at in your journey. This episode is brought to you by Blue Book Services. I would give a normal ad read here for produce, Blue Book, but we've got the man, the myth, the legend, Jeff Lair back on with us to talk produce commodities today. But always, make sure to go to producebluebook.com and click join today to learn more. But you got a whole episode today all about produce. Jeff, welcome back. How are you today, sir?
Doing well. Good to be back with you guys on a final episode for 2023.
Yeah,
and it's been a pleasure this year. I think we've done this is number 3 or 4.
I think it's with you. We've done at least 3.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a few of you guys on between produce and lumber this year, but
we've done 4 this
awesome.
year.
Yeah, and we've enjoyed the ride, and hopefully your listeners have as well, and have been better equipped to work produce transportation loads wherever they may be. And I'm excited for this episode today and the specific content we're going to be hitting.
One of the things I actually did recently in the last month is we started releasing. So we do a normal newsletter on Tuesdays that highlights a lot of news in the industry and some of our new content. We added a second newsletter on Thursdays now, and it's got a commodity specific section. So it starts off with Blue Book Services, and we go through some of the highlights that week. They come right from a lot of the news and articles on the producebluebook.com website. And then I've been highlighting a different commodity with some of the Know Your Commodity stuff and putting like the seasonal calendar in there. I think it's pretty cool. I think we're going to stick with it. We've done a handful of them, but there's so much information on your website that members get access to. And definitely for anyone out there that's not a member yet, check out producebluebook.com, hit the join today button, and be like the rest of us cool kids out there that are getting all the good credit information and all the marketing and sales leads out there. Before we get into all the topic and whatnot today, we got to start off with sports. For once, I can say the Bills didn't lose because, actually, the Bills had a bye week, so I guess there's an asterisk there. But that's really what I'm getting at, is the Bills did not lose this past weekend. They're playing the Chiefs this weekend on Sunday afternoon. It's going to be weird. I'm landing in Nashville to go to my brokerage's corporate office next week. I'm landing like 40 minutes before kickoff, and I've got to get my luggage, get my rental car, get to my room, and then try to find some location downtown Nashville to watch the Bills game. So any listeners out there who are in Nashville, who want to hang out and watch the Bills game, hit me up. But elsewhere around the sports realm, let's see.
Steelers took a loss to the Cardinals, and I think the Cardinals had 2 wins going into Sunday's game, so that wasn't great.
Yeah.
Pretty sure Steven's Bengals pulled off a win. Didn't they play Monday night?
Steven, unmute yourself. Come in, producer Steven. I want to talk about Trevor Lawrence being taken out too. How do you feel about how do you feel about the record 6-6? Because I can relate to you on that one now.
We don't have a quarterback for the rest of the season. Well, we might. I don't know. We'll find out next week.
He looked pretty good out there
this week. Yeah. I didn't get to watch the game, unfortunately, because I've been sick the last 3 days. But
fair enough. But Trevor Lawrence goes out for the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's going to be interesting to see how that division. Is that the AFC South where you got the Titans, the Colts?
Yeah.
Who else is there? Houston. I don't remember.
Houston, and then
Colts, Titans. Titans are pretty much not pulling much this year, but a lot of like middle of the road wild card teams, like 6 wins, 7 wins, 5 wins. It's going to be an interesting final 5 weeks of the season. So.
Yeah, I'm excited. I will say the one thing that, and I was talking to someone else about this, but the one thing this season has kind of done is there's been a lot of starting quarterbacks that have went out, and the backup quarterbacks have done surprisingly well.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the inability for the defensive coordinators to adjust appropriately, or if the backups are just that good now. I'm not sure. But hopefully it stays this way, and we can.
It's probably a case-by-case answer. But yeah.
But I mean, you had the Vikings. Was that Dobbs?
Yep.
Was a stud for like 2 or 3 weeks. Yep. I don't know how he's doing now.
A lot of teams, using backups this year. So
Cleveland's on a backup again.
I think 4 out of the 7 teams in the AFC in the playoff hunt have backup quarterbacks that we're talking about this morning.
Yeah.
It really makes me feel good as a Bills fan with Josh Allen that I'm not in a wild cards. Well, I guess we're in the hunt. We're one of those 3 or no? Would you say 7 out of 12?
No, I think it's 4 out of 7.
4 to 7
AFC
that are in the hunt. So we're one of
that was the stat.
We're one of the 3 that's in the hunt. Hey, maybe that's a good thing then. Who knows? We'll see. Jeff, what's going on in Chicagoland?
Well, we have a young Blackhawks team with the number 1 draft pick, Connor Bedard, and he's rocking it on that front. But the team is still trying to, I think, just grow. I mean, it's young squad, but we're excited for the future. As you're aware, the bad news bears in the NFL are not looking too good, boys, and so that is no bueno here in Chicagoland. And we'll see if the QB remains, since we're talking QBs and backups. But as you're aware, we had a little bit of an injury on our number 1 QB, and had the second stringer come in, and he did pretty good. So no playoff opportunities for our team. The Bulls, well, they're mediocre at best. But what about CFP, college football playoffs? And
I was hoping we could bring this up. So thoughts on Florida State kind of getting screwed a little bit, huh?
I think that's very rough when you go in as a team, and I realize, and to me, it comes down to business, it would seem. But here's a team that's gone 13-0, and they've gone down to their 3rd string quarterback, and they're not in it. And they're not in it.
Was that the argument? Is it like they're not going to have a push in the postseason, so we're not going to give them the 4 spot?
I don't know specifically. But I mean, think about it. Here's a team's 13-0.
Yeah.
I mean, if their starting QB would be available and healthy, and I think they'd be in it.
Yeah.
That's why I don't really enjoy college football. I get the argument.
It's so subjective, but it's not like an objectiveness to it. It's so big though as well.
Exactly. I'm like, oh, well, when you got votes and you made it a democracy, I'm like, is it really have the same competitiveness as the aspects of other sports?
And even next year, though, to your point on that, Benjamin, I think we're going to an 8 or 12 team playoff.
Yes, that's right. That is next year.
It's going to be a total different landscape.
It's either 8 or 12. And I think that'll make everybody shut up, because I think once you get past like 5 and 6, they're not even close. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at least there's no more. But then what? The 9, if it's 8, the 9th team's going to complain, or if it's 12, the 13th team. And at that point, I don't care, because like I said, once you get past those top like 5 or 6 schools, it really is just, you're not even in the same like competitive level. So who knows?
So time will tell, and we'll see. And another what are 30 days for sure on the college level, because bowl games and everything will be done. But and then we'll get in the playoffs here early January, right? For
I think it's like New Year's. Yeah, like right on New Year's, they do the semifinals, and then the finals are like the first Monday. It's a Monday night in early January. It's like usually like around the 8th, 9th, or 10th or something like that.
But. Yeah, like the first Monday, probably the 8th, Monday the 8th, because you got the New Year's games and stuff going on.
Yep. Yeah, that would make sense. Well, good stuff. Ben, we got anything in the news realm?
Not that I've seen.
I know I did see Ann Reinke from TIA she posted about the new department that was put out there by the Biden administration. It's supposed to help further collaboration and whatnot for the freight industry. Just kind of just saying that, like, hey, if what they say is going to have a benefit or positive impact and benefit to our industry, she said TIA is on board. And I agree. But the reality is, how many times have we been promised X, Y, and Z from a government organization? It doesn't.
I'm not going to hold my breath.
I commented on her LinkedIn post too, because the article that she posted, it had like the image with it was a picture of Biden talking in front of like two big semi trucks, and I commented like the photo op made me laugh. It made me think of like my time with the military. Whenever like there's a big announcement and there's going to be news cameras, they're always like, get some big, cool-looking trucks, put him behind the boss so he looks cool when he's on camera. Yeah. If the governor's going on TV to talk about the National Guard, they'll like try to make everything look so cool around them. So I thought that was funny. And then I looked at it, and the photo op from that article was from a picture from 2022. It had nothing to do with this actual thing. So anyway, that's our news. Ben, let's give a shout out to DAT, and we're going to talk produce with Jeff after that.
Tired of struggling to find accurate rates and the right carriers for your freight? With DAT1, you can access more than 500 million posted loads and trucks every year. That's 3 times more capacity than any other load board. Plus, their integrated freight management system makes it easy to cover loads 24/7. They have the most trusted network of carriers, brokers, and shippers in the industry. You'll get real-time rates on every lane, so you'll know exactly how much a shipment will cost before you commit to it. Plus, you get instant access to top bids from qualified carriers around the country. Get 10% off your first year of DAT1 when you visit the link in the show notes.
Absolutely. All right, let's shift gears into produce. So, Jeff, we're gonna get a little specific today in a certain areas of the country, but let's give a 40,000 foot view. Anything big or eye-opening or exciting, or what's going on in the world of fresh food, produce, and the reefer market across the country? And what's that look like today or this time of year? We're in December.
Yeah, and even for your listeners' benefit, and even as we talk prior to jumping on this recording of the episode, there's a lot of truck volume movement in the produce supply chain. And we're going to hit 3 specific geographic areas, and then on a 40,000 high-level foot view for your listeners, and then dive into specifically Florida. But let's go as you look at the United States, go from right to left here. But Florida's moving produce winter veg right now, and so that's an exciting opportunity for listeners to just know that. And then what are the main commodities that are moving out of there? And we'll swing back to that in a minute. Then, in the Southwest, specifically, let's just say Texas, both Texas growing areas as well as primarily Rio Grande Valley, you've got a lot of fresh fruit and veg coming up from Mexico. And then keep moving over to the left, Arizona, both on a growing side and then on import in from Mexico as well. I mean, your main border crossings for fresh fruits and vegetables are Rio Grande Valley and a number of different ports, land ports there. And then also Nogales. And then even in California, you got Chula Vista. We're not going to talk a lot about that border crossing, but down in that area, actually, I guess it would be Tijuana border crossing, which is right next to Chula Vista in the U.S. Those would be the 3 main ones, and there's also, and we can get into that in a future episode, the Tijuana, Chula Vista, and what comes across there. But for today, we're just going to focus on Florida, Texas, and Arizona.
Cool. So, and I want to, for anyone who this is their first produce episode, Ben, I feel like we owe it to them to give just a brief discussion on produce in general before we zoom in on it. Produce is one of those commodities that throughout the year is going to move around where it's grown, as Jeff mentioned, and also where it may be imported if it's coming from, south up through South America or Mexico and eventually crossing in, whether it's Nogales or Southern California or into Texas, Laredo area, whatever it might be. So the way it impacts capacity, specifically in the reefer market, is going to change drastically from one time of the year to the next. And it's one of those things that can change within a week, if not within a day. The whole market can flip. Florida is a way better example of that when citrus season comes around. But the big takeaway when it comes to prospecting, let's say you're using Produce Blue Book to identify a certain number of growers or shippers with a certain commodity. Let's say they're going to start shipping in, February. You don't call them February 1st and start soliciting those customers and building that relationship then, right? They're already in the thick of it at that point. You need to backwards plan and figure out, 2-3 months before, what are they expecting their needs to be, right? Even though the Know Your Commodity tool on Blue Book might say, they're going to start, here's the months available. If there's a weird winter or a weird climate difference from the average, that could shift to the left or right. And when I say that, I mean it could be earlier or later, give or take, based on how extreme the weather patterns differed from the average. So get in contact early and often when it comes to these commodities. And I wouldn't recommend try to be a master of every single commodity out there in produce, because even though produce is, a general term for a variety of different commodities, a lot of them are extremely different. They've got very different risks when it comes to claims. They have different growing and shipping seasons. And there's a lot of different nuances that are different between the individual commodities. Ben, anything to add? Just general one-on-one produce stuff here. Ben, you are muted. It's 2023, man. How long have we been using online technology these days?
For sure. I coughed.
There we go.
I didn't want to cough into the mic as you guys were talking, so I muted myself. But what I was going to say is, for sure, you want enough runway and time frame, right, that you can build some rapport and at least some relationship, even if it's a couple calls prior to their season hitting, right? Because, if you think about it, that's what they're doing, right? Before any seasons, the shippers are going and they're calling all their existing carriers. You guys still operational, still running the same lanes. Hey, can you give us some quotes on the lanes this year that you ran for us last year? And some of those companies will be in business, some of them won't, right? So there's transition, and they're going to evaluate long before the need is there so that they can at least be as prepared as possible. That's when you want to start having these conversations. So for sure, long before season hits is when you want to start reaching out. And again, anybody that's in this industry that plans on being here longer than a season, right? It's not once. It's going to come around again, right?
Yes,
so
every year.
I can't point this out enough, right? Where I've talked to somebody that was like, oh, I just generated all these leads and the season's over. And I'm like, well, you plan on retiring sometime around this spring? And they kind of laugh like, no, why? I'm like, what about the summer? Like, no. I'm like, well, the calendar kind of comes all the way back around. Like, they'll still be here next year. Leave them in your system. Because the one thing I think that is really important when you're building a prospecting system related to the categories we're going to discuss here, it's not just this season, right? You're going to use it next season. It's an asset for your business, right? So focusing and timing this and building them in there, right, is not just a set it and forget it thing. It's going to come back around, and it's important to line those things up and think a little bit down the line as you're doing your prospecting.
Yeah, and I want to add in, I'll kind of give an example of another way to do this, right? So I had an office historically that did a very large volume of onions and potatoes in the Idaho, northwestern part of the United States, where there's a very predominant season for those to ship, spring into summertime. That being said, where potatoes and onions come from throughout the rest of the year, depending on what variety it is going to be very, very different, right? So what he did, his office did, was that predominant season when they're their growers were in their peak time. That was where they spent all of their efforts. But when it got light for them throughout the rest of the year, they stuck with those same commodities where they were already industry subject matter experts, but they just shifted to, hey, where is this stuff shipping out of in the rest of the year, right? As I go into the fall and in the middle of, late summer, where can I shift to where I'm prospecting? So that way I'm still moving the same commodity throughout the year. It's a perishable skill. I don't want to, miss out on the trends of what's going on in my commodities industry and all the news with it. And then, hey, when it comes back to my, my bread and butter's peak season, I'm going to shift my focus right back to there.
I want to point something out too, because Jeff alluded to this, and Dean did this week's market update was on produce and the winter shift into produce, right? And I want to just read the one part from what went out this week, actually like 2 days ago for anyone listening. It was, one of the more fascinating logistical moves occurs around this time of year. The shift in production and processing of leafy greens from Salinas Valley or America's Salad Bowl, just like Jeff said, to Yuma, Arizona, and the desert region, southeast of California, right? And they said, according to the Arizona Farm Bureau, Yuma transforms into the winter salad bowl, producing almost all of the vegetables. Just like Jeff said, lettuce, broccoli, kale, cauliflower that are consumed in the United States during the winter. In fact, he even references one company that literally relocates all of their stuff from California to Arizona at this time of year. And they said the company referenced did it in around 60 trucks in 2 days, literally moving everything from Cali over to Yuma, and they're just shifting the entire production there.
Yeah. That's a really good point. The salad bowl. I like that.
It is. If you guys ever get out to Salinas Valley, I'd encourage you to. And any of your listeners, it's worth the trip. Obviously, if you're picking up a load and you're earning some money on it or delivering, but most likely going to be pulling out of Salinas, it just gives perspective and context. And even getting down to Yuma, I've not yet gotten down to that area of the United States as a growing area, but it's significant. And obviously, too, even what you noted there, Ben, on it moving from Salinas Valley to Yuma. And companies, and I think there's more than one, move like production, in the packing and the people all the way down there for the season, whatever that is. Just another footnote, Nate, to your comment on onions and potatoes, Idaho. For your listeners, just knowledge, because I think this is important. Some of these items that are grown, once they're done growing, they can go into storage.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've been to one of the potato storage ones here in New York, and I was shocked because they can be, seasonally available throughout the year. But yes, continue. It's a good point.
So potatoes are 1, onions are 2, apples are 3. Now, does that mean that grower shipper would have a supply for the whole year? It depends. And I also am not totally certain, but shelf life. But you can put potatoes to sleep, and that's so that they can supply their customers with potatoes. So yeah, you've got product moving fresh right now, ready to be harvested, picked, and transported from these areas that we're hitting today. But I think it's important for listeners to know too that some of these items, I'd say specifically on the veg side, can be stored. Not many, but some.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It is. And so that's just helpful for the supply chain. It's helpful for us, the consumers. It's helpful for transportation companies to know as well, because and I realize too, there's a certain window of Florida shipping veg and fruit out of that respective state, which we're talking about here this afternoon. But there's other areas in the country where things can be stored and they can be shipped almost year round, if not year round, depending on what it is.
And that just kind of like reinforces the whole concept of each commodity can be vastly different. A lot of them can also be very similar, like certain kinds of berry and citrus might have a lot of similar traits and characteristics, but they can be extremely different. I did want to ask you this. So the notes you sent over to us beforehand, you've got some truck volume per month coming from the USDA and Market News. And you have numbers for Florida, Nogales, and Texas for January, February, and March. Are these for 2023 or expected 2024?
Yeah, so these numbers are historical, so it's not anticipated for 2024, but I would say
probably the general trend would be expected, though, right?
Yeah, and correct. As long as things are not going to get frozen, but yes, in general. But let's if we can, let's just go across from Florida over to Texas and over to Arizona as far as volume, because I think it's important for your listeners to know. And then also, what do we have available for your listeners on Blue Book Online so that they could potentially reach out to these respective grower shippers, importers in these states? Sound good?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Sure. So here, Florida, obviously January is just right around the corner, but 6,800 loads of produce. I mean, and that consists of a lot of different items, including out of Florida, beans, tomatoes, sweet corn, peppers, grapefruit, and one of my favorites out of Florida for the winter season, strawberries.
There you go.
You got so they have a certain window, as we've said, and then it gets too hot down there, and the conditions aren't amenable for growing those items, and so then they're done, and those seasonal deals on a lot of those specific commodities, I say almost all of them except for grapefruit, move up the East Coast. But again, Florida for January, you're looking at around 6,800 truckload volume of fruit and veg, including the commodities we just mentioned and more. Then February, 6,300, and March, 8,400, which gives you a little over 21,000 truckloads in volume.
I'm assuming that March, because the March number, this is historical, but that trend line probably would be similar given no other outside changes circumstantially. But a big push in March, is that kind of the introduction of the citrus season, you think?
Well, I think citrus is on Florida specifically as a footnote, and I didn't look here, and I don't have the specific answer for you on that. But citrus out of Florida is primarily grapefruit and tangerine. A lot of the oranges are juice oranges.
Gotcha.
Juice, for orange juice. That if you like,
Tropicana's right back. They're right down there in like the Fort Pierce area, I want to say.
They are. Yeah, Tropicana and some of the other ones, like I think Natural Delight. I mean, you got a lot of different juice companies, but because they've been hit by the canker, as far as I know, on the trees, the citrus landscape of Florida has changed dramatically.
Gotcha.
As far as fruit being consumed versus fruit going to juice.
Gotcha. Okay. Good to know.
Yeah. So all this is good information to know, and we'll try, if we can, include a link to this USDA market information, because that way your listeners, if they really wanted to, could look at either the podcast or I think the YouTube video, and they could just dial it in for themselves as well.
Ben, did you know that as a Floridian, that Florida's oranges are used primarily for? I guess it would make sense, right? Because you'd want to have it, get your supply for your orange juice as close as possible to the source, right? Versus shipping the actual consumed orange.
There's a really interesting story about this that I heard recently, and I really wish I could remember the person's name. But there was somebody, I think this is around the 1920s or 30s, and might even have been the 40s. It's somewhere around that time frame. But this person who I'm thinking of, and I really can't remember their name, I was listening to the story. They said literally kind of invented orange juice. And how it played out was basically lots of the orange growers back in the day all kind of fought with each other, and they were all fighting over the same market share. Well, how can we sell more oranges? There's only so many people in the United States that eat it, right? And he literally created the idea of marketing orange juice to the United States as a healthy way to start your day with vitamin C. And he said, instead of all of you fighting with each other, we're all going to get together. And he said, well, how many oranges does it take to fill out a glass of juice? I can't remember whatever the number was, but it was a lot more than I expected. I don't know, like 5 or 6 or whatever. And he's like, okay, one person eats one orange. If you can sell one glass of orange juice to everybody in the United States for breakfast, look at this untapped market that we don't have. And that lasted for like 90 years until like somewhat recently, where more studies have shown that there's like the same sugar, I think, in a glass of orange juice as like a can of soda. So like some of those numbers have now come back down, but it's a really interesting story as to how somebody literally changed the entire landscape of what we eat for breakfast to sell more oranges. And it lasted for literally almost a century. I mean, it's still to this day. I mean, I still drink orange juice, but it was a really interesting story of how somebody just literally looked at marketing and found a way to create a market where there wasn't one. And to your point, I don't know specifically where the Florida market is right now as related to like juice versus the oranges that ship, but orange juice is a large portion of it, I know.
Interesting. Well, I want to take a quick break here and give a shout out to our friends at Lean Solutions Group, and we'll get back into it. Is your freight brokerage hiring? You got to check out Lean Solutions Group, the industry leader in nearshore staffing for logistics companies with offices located in South America, Mexico, and the Philippines. They offer a wide range of roles from back office operations to web development and marketing. Partner with the best. Visit www.leangroup.com to learn more. That's Lean spelled Lean group.com. All right, Jeff, back to Florida here.
Yes, sir.
So those are good truckload numbers. And I guess the takeaway here is you got over 21,000 loads historically. And I mean, as our country grows in general, that number I would suspect would go up, whether it's a small growth or a large growth over time. But what does that look like as far as customer or produce Blue Book contacts or companies that are within your service?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, there's a lot of opportunities for transportation companies on these commodities. And obviously this isn't exhaustive either, but, peppers, there's about 160 companies that ship peppers out of Florida. There's next in line is strawberries, primarily out of Plant City area, but there's other areas, but that would be like the Florida. Plant City, Florida is the strawberry capital, as far as I know, of the world. As far as I think, just per area acreage of growers growing strawberries in Plant City. If you see on your label when you pick up a 16 ounce or 32 ounce or more clamshell here in the coming months out of Florida, most likely the grower's name will be on there. It should be, as well as where they're located. And I would say a lot of your strawberries will be Plant City, Florida strawberries. So again, 55 companies handling strawberries, growing, shipping in Florida. Then you got sweet corn, 35 companies, and then grapefruit at 15. So that's Florida from a Blue Book online database perspective, totaling all those different 4 commodities there for Florida, give you 260 plus companies, grower shippers that you could potentially pursue to see if they're interested in needing transportation.
So let me ask you this: as a Produce Blue Book member, I've got hundreds of, you just named hundreds right there alone of just a handful of commodities in one state in the U.S. What kind of information am I getting from Produce Blue Book about those different companies?
Yeah, so not only, do you get a contact name where they're located, but these companies also would include a Blue Book rating, which represents the overall trade practices that a company has with another company, and that's something that they earn through business transactions that they do, and then that's reported back to us. So that would be important for your listeners to know. So not only these companies, it's a directory for prospecting, but you also can pursue what we'd call a well-rated company that's earned a rating, and it's based on, again, their overall business practices. So that's a helpful thing to know. And then also, from the transportation side, I think that'd be the key thing, as well as there's a business report on each respective company that we have that includes the key owners of the company, how long they've been in business, their historical rating, as well as financial, if they're a buying company of fresh fruits and vegetables, and then also a pay rating. But all that's there and more for them to access, and that's part of Blue Book membership.
I want to add in, this is like personal use case. So the brokerage that I work for, we've got a trucking company as well. For any general commodity, we'll use a standard generic credit database to look up a random shipper. So like, let's say somebody sells or ships steel or, I don't know, like clothing, retail stuff. We'll go to a credit reporting company like Ansonia or something like that. What I love about Blue Book is it's industry specific. So like when we get any kind of like fresh food growers, and anyone in that market, we'll go to Blue Book. And I mean, I think there's something to be said about an organization that is commodity specific and focused, because you get a lot, like there's a lot of buy-in from the user network on there. Like people are going to report stuff more often because they're very invested in that specific commodity and that business practice. So whether you're a motor carrier or a freight broker, I personally can vouch for it. It's a great tool. There's not a whole lot. I have yet to have a bad credit decision come from using Blue Book's credit rating. I don't suspect that will ever happen, where we've had plenty of other commodities where we have, or someone that's not listed in Blue Book, and we've had to go to a separate credit reporting database. And you get maybe some mixed reviews where it's only as good as who's reporting on them, and not everybody does. And we might say, all right, yeah, we'll give these folks credit. And then we realize like that was a bad idea. So I think there's a lot to be said about how good and like the level of quality that Blue Book's credit rating does give. And I mean, it's kind of a one-stop shop, right? You've got the company name, address, point of contact, all kinds of details and information about them. And then ultimately, like, are they going to pay their bills, right? That's one of the things we definitely want to know as a freight broker.
Well, I think in addition to this, and this has come up recently, we've done a lot more work with our clients and Blue Book, but also when things don't go the way they're supposed to, right? The assistance with help in claims, I think, is invaluable, right? I mean, can't tell you how many times where we've had a client where there was, even recently, right, where there was a claim and it was like an odd situation that isn't clear cut. And to me, there's so much value in talking with somebody that does that thing all day, that you can trust that at least where they're guiding you is coming from a place of experience as opposed to guessing, because you're looking at a lot of money. I mean, if you're shipping some of the fragile, perishable berries, there's lots of claims very often. And if you're new into any area of produce, having that type of resource, I feel, is well worth what the membership is worth in and of itself. That's just setting aside the prospecting ability, the credit, and everything else you get from it. That to me is worth the membership.
Yeah, and just to that point too, that's another part of membership is our trading assistance team. And we've written trading and transportation guidelines. They're available on producebluebook.com, our website, for anyone, and well worth the read before you, or whether you're currently in transporting or brokering produce loads. It's worth knowing and noting those guidelines for you and regulations. A lot of those we wrote. This goes back years ago, and they're still applicable, available, and honored throughout the produce supply chain. So, yeah, we're delighted and thrilled to serve members throughout the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and the world with our information, and just trying to provide this data to help them succeed and be successful and grow their business.
Love it. Well, I was looking at some of the commodities that you had listed there, and I just pulled up in the Know Your Commodity tool, I pulled up grapefruit. And I don't think I've ever personally seen a grapefruit tree. It kind of looks like an orange tree.
Mm-hmm.
Never realized that. So it says optimal storage temperature for up to 6 weeks, 54 to 57 degrees Fahrenheit, with 85 to 95% relative humidity. Temperatures below 50 degrees will cause chilling injury. So, we could have picked any commodity there, but I think there's a point to be made that, again, this is kind of like produce 101. It's more of a general statement about it. Is the majority of times that I've personally seen a claim in produce, and Jeff, if you want to speak to it after me, feel free if you've got any stories to tell. But the majority of times that I've seen issues with claims in produce tends to be that there was an issue with the reefer setting, whether it broke down or they had the wrong temperature set, or they had the wrong settings on there. I've even seen where they screwed up Celsius and Fahrenheit, believe it or not. And I have heard of the occasional, it was picked and loaded too fast, and basically almost like the grower kind of like set it up to try and claim what would have been it's really their fault, right? And they're going to try to claim the truck for it, essentially. But I have seen that too, versus any other issues. Like I've seen more of like the temperature controlled stuff than anything else. So like I guess the takeaway here is if you're dealing with produce, make sure that you have the right equipment type, make sure that you have the right settings, the temperature, all of that stuff, right? Talk to your drivers about pre-cooling. Florida, like Jeff mentioned, the summer is extremely hot. As you approach those final months where they're shipping citrus out of Florida and it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter, it's really, really important that your driver pre-cools their trailer before getting loaded. Because if they show up and they're inside of their trailer is 110 degrees and you load the product on there at 55 or whatever it's going to be, no bueno.
Right? I'm really curious, Jeff, where you think, like if we had a pie chart of what are the most likely causes of claims, because the last 3 that I've helped somebody with were all related to the last thing you said, Nate. The shipper either didn't pre-cool the product or had it out somewhere where it wasn't at the right temperature, because the reefer readouts were all fine. There was no issue, to your point, in the most likely cause, which was driver error. The setting wasn't right. So when everyone looked at the reefer readings, they're all fine. There was no variation, and no one can figure out where the claim was. And that's really why it was so valuable.
Were they pulped before or no?
They were not. And it happened to be bagged lettuce. So I don't know that they could pierce it, but I guess they should have gone in and checked the temperature inside the box in between, because there were large bags of lettuce. Yeah. And for sure, this was a few of the instances that I know we referred over to Blue Book, and Blue Book helped work through it, because it was really more of a matter of opinion. When you looked at the objective data, it was like, well, okay, like what caused this, right? And I am curious, where do you see most of these fall on?
That's a good question, and I wish, and you guys have dialogued extensively with my teammate Doug Nelson here on the trading.
Yeah, we've had Doug on talk claims. I kind of figured we should have teed it up that way, that Doug's probably the better disputes guy.
I didn't mean to ambush you there. Just kind of came up in topic.
No, but I think you asked a good question, and I think it would be a good one maybe to report back to you and your listeners on in 2024 in a future issue. Let's just keep that one on the burner, so to speak. But I think what you see, and each of you have experienced this, a lot of the different claims are what we experience and what potential listeners can experience. So it goes back to your point of knowing, and what we've already tried to communicate. As you transport fresh fruits and veg, you have to do it right, or you don't do it at all. That's my mantra.
Yeah.
And it takes homework, and it does, and it takes work, but you can be successful. I mean, and these are loads that most likely, and you help me here, Ben and Nate, you get a better return because they're riskier to haul, because it needs to maintain temp. And if you're not maintaining temp, then you got issues to work through, and usually that happens. But the other thing too, I think that needs to be kept in mind is, as we hit the winter months, is sometimes the outside temp could impact your temp. And even in the summer, you hit that, Nate, too. But if you're hauling out of Florida with strawberries, and all of a sudden you hit, and you're getting Orchard Park where you are, Nate, in Buffalo, and you hit PA and New York, and it's wicked cold. That could impact
reefers. Yeah, reefers just aren't keeping things cold. In some cases, they're keeping things from freezing. To your point, right? It's maintaining whatever temperature it needs to be necessarily.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception for new freight brokers. They hear reefer, and they either think of marijuana first, but no, they think of refrigerated as like the primary, right? But the reality is it does both. So like, it's that's why I always try to say temperature controlled, right? Because Jeff, the example you just used is perfect, right? Let's say, like we just talked about grapefruit. Let's say it's got to be in the mid 50s, okay? And you're leaving Florida where it's 80. You have to cool it, right? As you head north, you cross that Mason-Dixon. At some point, you're turning that cooler off when you're in that natural range, and then you got to flip on that heater, the heat setting to keep it warm because it's 25 degrees up north. So that's a really, really good point.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I want to hit what you just said, Jeff, too, before we go on to that. And it was, I hear that so much of, wow, I see the margins on shipping raspberries. I'm making $700-800 on these loads. These are fantastic. And like the first thing out of my mouth is always, right, like, do you have deep pockets? And like, what do you mean? We're making lots of money. I'm like, yeah, but you're playing at the big boy table. Like in my head, I see risk, the upsides and the downsides. The more risk you take, the more opportunity you have to win. And I'm like, that's just a big gamble. And I'm like, I've been around long enough that I've seen brokerages that love it, run at it full speed. 3-4 weeks in it, they think all is great. They're making all the money in the world. 1 claim, 2 claims. Ooh, 3 claims in 2 weeks. Oh, that was unexpected.
Holding all their payments.
All payments.
Yeah.
And then the claim process starts, which takes however long. And now got no money coming in to pay your carriers. You got no money coming in. They don't want to give you any more loads until you resolve it, or you come out of pocket and then let the claim process reimburse you. And it's like, yeah, there is more margin there. But to your point, Jeff, there's certainly more risk. If you are making way more than you feel like you should, you're probably taking more risk than you realize. And you should probably take a step back and at least just assess. Not saying you should stop, but I think it's important that you're always looking at the risk you're taking versus the returns and making sure that when things do go wrong, and they inevitably do in our world, like they do every day, can you back that up, or is it going to tank you? And I mean, is it going to take 2 years of work to build a company and you're going to let it end up literally going to nothing because you weren't keeping an eye on those things? And they're not small things. Especially when most freight brokers have most of their business coming from a few of their customers, right? Yeah, 1 or 2 of those claims could tank a very, very good business. So definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Can we roll over to Texas now, or anything more in Florida?
Yeah, we went on for a long time there. I'm sorry. We can hit Texas whenever else you want as we get towards the end here.
Yeah, so let's dive into Texas and Arizona. So, on the Texas front, in January you got a little over 1,100 loads rolling out of Texas, and then in February 1,000, and in March about 1,300. So that gives you about 3,400 loads rolling out of Texas fresh fruits and vegetables, and the main big ones that I see here is cabbage, greens, herbs, grapefruit, oranges, and onions. Onions is on our side in the Blue Book online database. There's over 120 companies that grow, ship onions out of Texas. And as you know, like you may know, or your listeners probably don't, but I mean, Texas sweets. I mean, there's a lot of onion growers and a lot of variety that rolls out of Texas. It's not just Vidalia onions in Georgia, and that's more in the springtime. But Texas rocks onions. They also a lot of herbs, but I believe that's primarily come out of Mexico. There's 80 companies that ship herbs out of Texas. Next would be cabbage. Again, probably Mexico for the most part out of that, and comes across the border and on up into the U.S. and Canada to respective buyers. You've got oranges, 37 companies. Grapefruit, 19, and then greens comes in at about 16. So a total of 337 companies that are handling those products, more one that I just listed off there.
Yeah, so there's definitely plenty of opportunity in Texas, to your point. Like, it's not just all in Florida.
It's a big state. All in Arizona. I'll give it that.
Yeah, for sure. And not all of it grows, obviously, too. And I think your listeners need to know that. But for sure, in the Rio Grande Valley, and in the border there as well, is your primary growing areas, I believe. I mean, obviously, your major cities in Texas include Dallas, Fort Worth Metro. That's huge. Houston, I think that's more of an import area for fresh fruit and veg. The port of Houston down there. You got San Antonio, which is actually has a terminal market on that in that city. You've got Austin, which is primarily just wholesale, and I am not totally sure where they're pulling all their produce from as far as suppliers. I mean, El Paso is another large city, but I don't think a whole lot's moving in and out of El Paso. So for sure a big city, but I'd say a lot of it is Rio Grande Valley in that growing area, as well as our friends down in Mexico.
El Paso would probably be, are they saying actually like El Paso proper or coming through like border crossing into El Paso?
No, I'm just saying.
That wraps up this episode of Freight 360. Check out the show notes for links to anything that we've referenced on this episode. And make sure to visit us online at freight360.net to see our entire library of episodes, videos, blogs, and more.
And make sure to check us out on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel for daily and weekly tips and content. If you'd like your question answered on the show, fill out the Contact Us form on our site, and we'll see you
January
next week.
January has about 4,600 loads. February, 4,400 loads. March, 5,200 loads. So, and that's both, I'd say that's the entire state. Let's just, for your listeners, that's the entire state, meaning Yuma, as we already talked about here, with your growing of romaine, lettuce, artichokes, and other commodities in the Yuma, Arizona area is significant for Arizona, as well as Nogales with all your Mexican produce coming across on that border crossing there. From the standpoint of Blue Book listings and opportunities for your listeners, if they would subscribe to Blue Book membership services, there's about 36 companies handling broccoli, lettuce, and romaine. I didn't include in that search Yuma, but so you got that rolling down there as well. So that's high level, doing a quick flyby, and then getting into the details here on these respective areas of the country coming forth here from January through March at least on loads that are going to be available to your listeners.
I can't see my map close enough. Is Yuma on the Mexican border?
No, it's just to the west of Phoenix.
Okay,
so it's up and on your way to San Diego. So it's desert.
It's south, but it's not a border city.
No.
Okay,
it's desert, but
gotcha.
So I think it's right off of. Is it? It's either 5 or 10. Highway going, because that runs right to San Diego between Phoenix and is it the 5?
Anyway. 10 goes
Yuma's on the border.
LA. Yeah, 10 goes LA. I know that for sure.
Yeah,
I've been on
Yuma's on the 8, and it is
okay, the 8. There you go.
Yeah, it is very, very close to the border of Mexico.
Sorry. I'm still geographically inclined to AZ.
Hey, none of us live in Yuma.
For sure. It's not too far from Phoenix, to your point, though, Jeff. It's just it's a little southwest of it, right down.
So if you're heading to San Diego from Phoenix, you got to be going a little bit south-ish, right? So.
Correct. Yeah, so just some exciting opportunities, for the produce industry on transportation here with what we've highlighted in this episode, and both from Blue Book membership opportunities for respective listeners to tap into, as well as just in general knowing what's going on produce-wise January through March of the coming year.
Good stuff. Ben, you got any other discussion points on produce?
I don't. Other than there's plenty of products, plenty of commodities to be prospecting, especially this time of year. Like we said, 2-3 months coming up into the future, right? Like you're looking at January, February, right into the heart of produce season picking up. Now's the time to start making those phone calls. And I want to point out to everybody making them, everybody's going to tell you, hey, we're not looking to work with anybody now. Our season isn't out for 2 or 3 months. And as soon as you hear that, that doesn't mean call back in 3 months. The rebuttal there is, hey, I know I'm giving you a buzz way ahead of time. I'm sure you guys aren't even in the process of starting to ship anything yet. I just wanted to discuss a little bit of what your onboarding process looks like, or maybe what some of your needs are. So if there is a need down the line, we might be able to talk about it, right? Just setting that precedent, not calling you with the expectation that you're getting business today or next week, right? You're going to have a much better conversation, and that way you can start to build rapport with a lot of these commodities in the areas that, Jeff pointed out for you. I mean, there's plenty to go after.
Yeah, you can always drop them the dad joke and just say, hey, I'm just calling to plant the seed. No pun intended.
There you go. And that's what I was going to say, too. It's seed planting for the most part, right? Yep. For your listeners out there and building a relationship. And candidly, a seed doesn't always necessarily sprout into fruit overnight or into a vegetable, right? It just doesn't. But but there are those instantaneous opportunities that happen, and that's tremendous, and we celebrate those. But it takes work. It does, and farming takes work, and so does transportation of produce takes work and care and a lot of love. And yet, if you do it right, there's definitely, as we talked about in this episode, reward.
Fruitful, pun intended.
All in, boys, all in.
Mic drop. All right. Well, Jeff, it was great having you on. We look forward to having you on again coming into the new year, 2024. Anything you want to add in before we sign off here for anyone listening?
Just again, tremendous time with each of you, and Freight 360 for this episode and previous episodes in 2023. Obviously, we've got a lot of good information that we've recorded over 2023 and previous episodes. Encourage you to dial into those as well on specific commodities, and just looking forward to continuing to rock it here for your team on the Freight 360 side, as well as for your listeners, so that they can hopefully do the best they can as they either are in the transportation industry already or looking to get into it and rock it and make it happen.
Awesome. Ben, any final thoughts from you? You have any proverbs today or anything? You usually have like a quote.
I do not have any prepared, but I will tell you that the guy's name I was referencing earlier was John McLaughlin, and it was the Drink an Orange campaign, and it came out around the early 1900s.
There you go.
But no quote. Other than whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
And until next time, go Bills. That wraps up this episode of Freight 360. Check out the show notes for links to anything that we've referenced on this episode. And make sure to visit us online at freight360.net to see our entire library of episodes, videos, blogs, and more.
And make sure to check us out on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel for daily and weekly tips and content. And if you'd like your question answered on the show, fill out the Contact Us form on our site, and we'll see you next week.